All right, so 10 questions that Microsoft has a tendency to ask, especially software development engineers in their jobs interviews. And of course, these are not technical questions. These are non-technical questions, but are also often a great starting point for a more technical conversation if you want. And I'm going to go through this list from the least asked to the most commonly asked. But if you just want the list, it's in the video description as well. Number 10, we have, tell me about the time when you experienced a conflict with a coworker and how did you handle that? So how do you handle conflict while working on a team? So the primary reason why they ask you such a question is because they are very interested in working with people that work well in teams. And if you're a high performer, you'll know that this is often quite challenging. Number 9, describe a failure and especially what you learned from that failure. So failure questions, especially in behavioral interviews, are one of the hardest to answer. And I would very much encourage you to prepare even 3 failures to talk about. And as the question implies, it's actually framed for someone who's not supposed to be a genius with behavioral interviewing. So they tell me about the failure and what you learned from it. The reason this for being is because they are interested in 2 things while asking you about failure. First, it's a proper failure, usually one that you can quantify in some way. And second of all, what you learned from it. So if you know about the STAR template to answer behavioral questions, the first half, situation, task, and action, is about explaining the failure, and the R, the results, should be half of your story with your learnings from it. I also have a couple of other videos if you want to learn more about answering failures. Number 8, describe your strengths and your weakness. Knowing your strengths is actually, should go without saying, is something really important for any interview, for any job interview candidate, but also your weakness. I've also noticed some people preparing 3 strengths and 3 weaknesses. So it's very much up to you how you prefer to talk about these things, but you should know that strengths and weaknesses are something you will also want to take seriously. If you're looking for a list, I also got a couple of these in other videos as well. Number 7, where do you see yourself 5 years from now? The primary reason why I included this is because Microsoft puts an emphasis on hiring people that know where they're going and see the broader picture of things. This is on their jobs website in their tips section. This is also a helpful part of answering another question I'll touch upon a bit later. Number 6, tell me about the time when you had more on your plate than you could possibly finish on time, and how did you deal with it? So how do you work under pressure? Think about the time when you had a stressful deadline. How did you go about how did you find the workaround there? Needless to say, this should be a success story, right? So unless they ask you for a failure, why would you talk about failures in a job interview? Number 5, what's your favorite piece of technology and why? Quite a Microsoft specific question. And I would also encourage you, if you prepare this one, also what's your least preferred piece of technology, and even further, how could you eventually improve on that? This is also one that you might get asked. Number 4, we get into the classic ones. Tell me about a recent project. So when they ask you, tell me about a recent project, that's equivalent to what's your most successful project, right? So be prepared to advertise yourself. In fact, number 3 is tell me about yourself. And in fact, in the tell me about yourself, you could, of course, talk about that recent project if you feel comfortable, between others. But tell me about yourself could be, an enumeration of the highlights that are the most interesting from your career. And I definitely encourage anyone preparing for a job interview, if there's one question you should prepare for, that's the tell me about yourself, because this is your unique moment, your unique opportunity to set a certain direction to your advantage into this overall conversation. Number 2, why Microsoft? So why Microsoft? I actually touched upon in one of my previous videos. Briefly in that video, I advise you to structure it in 3 parts, to talk about, to praise a little bit, then to talk about what's your unique skill set that you bring to the table. And last but not least, what's in for you, or where do you see yourself 5 years from now? If you remember one of the questions earlier, where do you see yourself 5 years from now? So putting things in perspective and thinking about why Microsoft go very much hand in hand. So that's why, I believe it's something that you should also prepare going into the job interview. Number 1, this is also a Microsoft specific question that gets asked a lot in engineering interviews, is to describe something technical to a 5-year-old. Something technical, it could be a linked list, it could be a computer, it could be object-oriented programming, or it could be recursion. It very much depends on the specifics of the role that you're applying for. But essentially, be prepared to get asked to explain something in simple terms. And this very much, again, goes hand in hand with the Microsoft culture and what they advertise as they appreciate, they value the most in the candidates they promote the most in these jobs interviews. So these would be the 10 questions that I believe would be the most relevant for you to prepare going into the non-technical portion of a Microsoft interview for a software development engineer. Hopefully you found this interesting, and thank you very much for watching.